This 1,100-ton stone was abandoned mid-construction 4,000 years ago, and no one on Earth today can explain how it was carved. It's called the Unfinished Obelisk. If completed, it would have stood taller than a 12-story building, carved from a single piece of granite. But the deeper you look, the stranger it gets. Beneath the scorching sun of Upper Egypt lies a mystery carved in stone. In the granite quarry of Aswan, an immense obelisk remains frozen in time, unmoved, unfinished, still tethered to the bedrock, as if the workers vanished overnight. It would have weighed more than 1,100 tons, the equivalent of over 200 African elephants in solid granite. Yet it was never raised, never transported. Instead, it rests silently in a carved trench, surrounded by signs of an ancient process that continues to divide archaeologists and engineers alike. Mainstream scholars say it was all done with primitive tools, copper chisels and round dolerite pounding stones. But the stone itself seems to tell a different story. Across the quarry, strange scoop marks appear. Deep, smooth grooves cut into one of the hardest materials on Earth. They aren't random fractures. They follow straight paths, some perfectly vertical, others bending around corners or continuing into ceilings and undercuts. If these were made by swinging heavy pounding stones, how did anyone carve upward or sideways? Even today, stonemasons and engineers examining the site admit that these markings look mechanical. Not chaotic, not accidental, but controlled. To test the orthodox theory, Egyptologist Mark Lenner and stonemason Roger Hopkins tried replicating the process for the Nova documentary Obelisk. Using dolerite pounders, they spent hours striking granite. The result was a few handfuls of dust. Days of work produced almost no progress. Even Reginald Engelbach, the archaeologist who excavated the site in 1922, recorded similar results, removing only about 5 millimeters of granite in an hour under ideal conditions. Yet in his report, he assumed the ancient Egyptians somehow achieved 8 millimeters per hour without explaining how. That's a 60% efficiency jump that no modern test has ever matched. In 2023, researchers finally measured the true efficiency of dolerite pounding. Using three-dimensional photogrammetry, they calculated that a 3.5 kilogram dolerite hammer could remove roughly 216 cubic centimeters of granite per hour, an almost negligible rate. At that speed, completing the unfinished obelisk would have taken multiple lifetimes of continuous labor. The data confirms what Engelbach and others sensed a century ago. Brute force pounding cannot explain the scale or precision of Aswan's granite work. The scoop marks themselves are too consistent and too clean. They appear in trenches so narrow, there's no room to swing a hammer, and on ceilings where gravity works against the worker. Some surfaces show more stone removed than necessary, as if a powered cutter overshot its path. Engineer Christopher Dunn compared these textures with those left by modern milling machines. His experiments on aluminum using ball-end mills produced identical ridges and striations to those seen at Aswan. He proposed that the quarrying might have been done using a mechanized cutting tool, perhaps something rotational, maybe even a chainsaw-like device capable of slicing granite with precision. At the same time, modern surveys have revealed new details about the quarry itself. Archaeologists recently found hieratic tally marks etched near the walls, records of daily progress and work scheduling. These marks cluster around the period just before the Nile's annual flood, suggesting the quarrying season was planned so the river could help transport the finished monoliths. In 2022, shallow seismic scans even mapped a man-made channel between 2 and 7 meters deep, leading from the quarry toward the Nile, hinting at an engineered waterway designed to float massive stone blocks downstream. It shows careful organization, but not necessarily how such extraordinary carving was achieved. Some evidence points to another layer in the process: fire. Recent field surveys have documented small pockets of charcoal and burnt granite fragments embedded in quarry debris, possible traces of fire setting, a method that uses heat to fracture rock. Yet even this cannot explain the deep, smooth scoop marks or the curved trench walls around the obelisk. Fire can crack stone, but it doesn't polish it. It leaves chaos, not geometry. Modern jewelers like Jeffrey Appling have demonstrated how ultrasonic drills can shape hard minerals using vibrating tips and abrasive slurries. If a similar process were scaled up in antiquity, it could explain the strange fluidity of the scoop marks, even in tighter curved spaces. High-frequency vibration literally breaks molecular bonds in stone, allowing it to flow under pressure. Was some ancient form of this technology once used here and later lost? Hundreds of dolerite spheres lie scattered around the quarry. They're cracked, splintered, and many appear deliberately broken. Engelbach himself admitted that smashing one required throwing it from 30 feet. So, if they weren't worn out from use as hammers, what shattered them? One theory suggests they weren't tools at all, but ball bearings, used to help pivot or transport massive stone blocks. Under the pressure of hundreds of tons, they would easily fracture, explaining their condition far better than the pounding stone theory. In one trench, a vertical line of scoop marks suddenly changes angle, as if a tool pivoted around a fixed point. Elsewhere, groove widths vary from zone to zone but remain consistent within each area, implying standardized tool sizes across different teams. In modern engineering, that's exactly what you'd expect in a site using multiple calibrated machines. Coincidence or forgotten system? Identical scoop marks appear far beyond Egypt. In Peru at Sacsayhuaman and Cusco, in Turkey's Göbekli Tepe, and even on the unfinished Moai of Easter Island, the same patterns emerge. Different continents, same impossible texture. As archaeologists now apply laser scanning, photogrammetry, and reflectance transformation imaging to document quarry surfaces, the mystery could soon be measurable. If these patterns prove uniform and periodic, the mystery may deepen rather than disappear. Ancient Egyptian texts speak of Zep Tepi, the first time, when gods or semi-divine beings ruled the land and taught humanity the arts of civilization. The Turin king list stretches Egypt's kingship back 35,000 years, before the first dynasty. If even a fragment of that story is historical, the unfinished obelisk might not belong to the civilization we credit, but to one that came before. Not a single team in modern times has ever carved, moved, and raised a granite obelisk of this scale using only copper chisels and dolerite balls. Not one. Yet the textbooks insist it was done routinely by workers who lived in mud brick villages and had no steel, no machines, and no electricity. At some point, faith in the official story begins to sound less like science and more like belief. So we're left with two possibilities. Either the ancient Egyptians achieved the impossible with simple tools, or they inherited techniques from a civilization now lost to history, one whose technology vanished, leaving only stone as testimony. Whatever the case, the unfinished obelisk remains undeniable proof that ancient engineering was far more advanced than we've been led to believe. Thank you for watching. If you found this journey as fascinating as we did, subscribe to Ancient Epochs for more.